Hello, everyone, and welcome to the hydrogen panel in ASEAN Energy Business Forum. My name is Seyed Mohsen Razavi, energy technology analyst in gas exporting countries forum located in Doha. And I am very pleased to moderate this panel discussion on a very interesting, vast, and debatable subject, hydrogen. So over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so, we are going to talk about the role of hydrogen in general decarbonization and championing the so-called blue, green, or turquoise hydrogen technologies. I think we are going to have a great panel with great distinguished panelists today on a very wide-ranging discussion on hydrogen. So this year, there are a lot of interest in hydrogen, and we will have a chance to dig deep into it. So let me move pretty quickly into the panel, and I take the moment now to introduce the four esteemed panelists just in their name perspective and their a very brief of their background. Our first panelist today is Dr. Fiona Simon. Dr. Simon is the CEO of the Australian Hydrogen Council, AHC, the peak body of the Australian hydrogen industry. Australian Hydrogen Council connects the hydrogen industry and its stakeholders in building a secure, clean, and resilient energy future based on hydrogen. Its members are from a range of sectors, including energy, transport, consulting, banking, and technology. Prior to joining the Australian Hydrogen Council, Fiona worked for close to 20 years in energy policy and regulation, specializing in energy retail, competition, and consumer protection matters. She has published a well-regarded academic book on retail energy regulation in Australia. Happy to have you, Fiona. Our second panelist today is Professor Emmanuel Kakaras. Dr. Kakaras has been Executive Vice President, Next Energy Business at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, EMEA, since the beginning of April 2021. Prior to this role, he was Senior Vice President for New Products and Energy Solutions at MHI Group company Mitsubishi Power Europe since January 2018. His R&D activities mainly focus on flexible operation of thermal plants, on fuel cells and electrolyzers, and the development of large-scale energy storage and utilization of CO2. He is a member of the board of directors of the EU turbines. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Kakaras. And our third panelist is Mr. Mathieu Geze. Mathieu is Vice President Asia at HDF Energy, a French independent power producer dedicated to the generation of clean, firm, and stable power. Mathieu has over 12 years of experience in renewable energy through various positions within IPP, EPC, and key supplier companies. Prior to joining HDF Energy in 2018, Mathieu managed the development of the North African and East European subsidiaries of a French developer and EPC. Then for 4 years, Mathieu was Business Development Manager at ArcelorMittal Exos. Mathieu holds 2 master's degrees in law and business administration. Very pleased to have you, Mathieu, in the panel. And our fourth speaker and distinguished panelist is Graham Gillies. That is a Vice President, ANP and Oilfield Equipment, APAC at Baker Hughes. He has worked in oil and gas industry for more than 28 years across the upstream value chain in offshore and onshore development. He has extensive experience in executive leadership, business management, and project delivery in international settings. Most recently, he has developed Baker Hughes' position as a key technology leader in LNG and energy industry. He has worked closely with government and stakeholders to develop partnership and supply chain infrastructure, leading to sustainable business outcomes. So with this very brief interview, let me set the scene and open the discussion with an opening with this very central subject, hydrogen, that is a central subject in the energy debates right now. So all of you are well aware, and also the audience are well aware that as the world keeps pursuing a negative or zero carbon in energy system, hydrogen roles is becoming progressively more perceptible. The supremacy of hydrogen is around the possibility of being employed in decarbonization of the so-called hard-to-abate sectors, like the long-haul and heavy transportation, heavy goods transportation, other type of the transportation that is challenged in electrification, like marine sector, like aviation, and in some industries with the high-grade temperature. So in these, that the other decarbonization pathways, such as electrification, are greatly challenged. Almost all scenarios developed in different organizations suggested that hydrogen will enhance its share in energy consumption. And there will be significantly higher demand for hydrogen in the coming years, even in the medium term. As for some examples, like IEA net zero scenario, like Hydrogen Council, IRENA, have all forecasted the demand for hydrogen at an annual level of around 500 million tons by 2050. So today, with our great panelists, we try to dig deep into the subject and explore how hydrogen can bring opportunity to the human energy needs in the future. Before moving to the opening question, I just would like to recall some of the color codes of the hydrogen and their definition. Of course, most of the audience are well aware of these codes, but still I need to just tell that the current volume of the hydrogen production worldwide that can be estimated at around 80 million tons. If we just consider the dedicated hydrogen production, is now gray hydrogen. That refers to the transformation and reforming of the fossil fuels, reforming of the natural gas for gasification of the coal into the hydrogen without any carbon capturing measures. The blue hydrogen is exactly like this, with the implementation of the carbon capturing and sequestration, whether it is the storage or utilization in the industry. So blue hydrogen is reforming or gasification of fossil fuels, but with these CCS measures. By green hydrogen is, what we mean by green hydrogen is the hydrogen produced from the electrolyzers, but it doesn't mean that all hydrogen produced from the electrolyzers fall into the categories of the green hydrogen. It is just the green hydrogen when the electricity for that electrolyze is produced from the renewable sources like wind, solar, or others. And so there are some other technologies that's now coming into the debate, like turquoise hydrogen, that is splitting the methane to the carbon, the solid carbon, and the hydrogen in the pyrolysis process. So let me move into the opening question, and I raise this question to all panelists. So let's start with Fiona. So as a general view, for now, what is your opinions, your point of view, that where does hydrogen stand today? How will hydrogen, in a general view, scale up and reshape energy markets, especially in ASEAN and Australia? How do you see the trajectory globally and within the region? Thank you, please.
Thank you, Mohsen, and it's a pleasure to be here. How do I see hydrogen? I see hydrogen as having this enormous potential. So there are, as you've mentioned, there are different ways of making hydrogen. So it's made and not found. You know, as an energy carrier, we can really add to the benefits of renewable electricity and to batteries by having hydrogen as this means of storing energy long term, and therefore being able to transport it through time and space. So I see it as a vital, as playing a vital role in a net zero future, and having an enormous potential to do so. But I'm talking about the future and potential because we are pre-commercial. So what hydrogen has yet to achieve is getting to scale across different production pathways and different uses. And of course, there are the different schools of thought about the value of the different colours, and different schools of thought about how we use the hydrogen. For us in Australia, we are certainly seeing a huge array of options. And that is from everything from, the enormous opportunity we have to export clean hydrogen, and in clean, I'll combine the colours, through to the opportunities in freight and heavy transport, certainly those hard to abate areas. There's a lot of talk at the moment about green steel, or at least the process to refine to the pig iron stage. But there's also the opportunities for methanol and ammonia, and looking at these sort of shipping fuels of the future. So there's lots of opportunity for Australia at the moment to be a leader in our region and to help other countries also move to net zero. But we still need to get to scale. We still need to get those projects at a really good size. Because at the moment in Australia, our largest electrolyser, which makes the green hydrogen, is 1.25 megawatts. And we actually need to get up to 1 gigawatt scale. So it is all happening very quickly, which is great. But it's very much this story of potential that we now need to have manifest in reality. But it has been really great to see the enormous enthusiasm and support for hydrogen globally. Billions of dollars. I think it was 10 billion announced in the US. There's significant amount of money that's been announced through the UK just in the same sort of week in August. Enormous opportunities here that people are seeing. So I think the race is on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's completely right. And I have some other questions about the role of Australia as one of the pioneers in the hydrogen. I think the third country that published the hydrogen strategy in November 2019, if I'm not mistaken. What do you think, Mathieu, what do you think about this question? What exactly does hydrogen stand today?
Well, thank you for the question, and I'm very glad to be part of this session today. I would like to say firstly that hydrogen is a great way to decarbonize many sectors, and as Dr. Fiona explained, we can address many industries, mobility, power industry. So the potential is there. There is no doubt. Though today hydrogen is not a commodity. There is no market price for green hydrogen today. And we see that there is a momentum worldwide. Again, as Dr. Fiona explained, globally, we see a huge willingness to make hydrogen, especially green hydrogen projects happen from Europe to Australia and Japan. But regarding Asia, I would say that it's growing. Australia is taking the lead with some pilot schemes to help the industry to grow. And maybe the industry needs to define what would be the suitable commercial schemes which will make green hydrogen bankable and efficient from today. And lastly, about Asia also, maybe we need to make a difference between two categories of countries. The ones who can afford to develop massively green hydrogen, and the other ones, the middle-income countries, which may face more challenges to help the industry to grow. But it doesn't mean there is no solution. It's just, it will be different ones than for the developed countries.
The second group, more challenges, it is regarded to the production of the hydrogen or providing potential of the hydrogen consumption. What do you mean by that?
I mean, today, if we want to use the hydrogen as a fuel, the green hydrogen as a fuel, indeed it has a cost. It has an extra cost compared to gray hydrogen. And I mean, the developing countries, I'm not sure that they can afford this extra cost. And hence, maybe they need to look at other ways to use the hydrogen. As an example, at HDF, we use hydrogen as a way to make megawatt hour. And in certain contexts, this is sustainable. No subsidies are required. And it can be a unique way, for example, to integrate more intermittent renewable energies to the grids.
Okay, thank you. What do you think, Graham? Do you think that the hydrogen scale up and reshape energy market globally in ASEAN, in Australia?
Yeah, look, thanks for the question, and thanks for being part of the panel, Mohsen. I think that the panelists, Mathieu and Dr. Fiona, have made some very poignant points, which is, look, I think hydrogen is something that we use already. It's just not used in the scale or in the demand that we currently see in the future. So I think one of the things that we've got to focus on is really thinking about what the market looks like. And I think as the market, we've got to look at the end users. So we've got to create markets. Today we see countries developing roadmaps, but we've got to create markets. So where's that hydrogen going to be used? Which countries are going to collaborate together to create those end use locations? From there, then you can talk about the generation of hydrogen. Then you can talk about the supply chain that's got to support the creation of the hydrogen infrastructure that will ultimately, firstly, create the hydrogen, then transport the hydrogen. So we see countries that are doing that. So I'm in Australia, like Dr. Fiona. Australia's putting a lot of capital into looking to create that hydrogen for export and hydrogen for industrial use. But we'll need many of the governments, even across Europe, as we see, making these roadmaps. And then that will create a market that will allow then companies to invest, whether it be private or public funding, to fund the creation of the technology that will need to move forward to make hydrogen cost effective. As Mathieu states, there's different types of hydrogen at different stages of commercialization. And we need to think about how it becomes cost effective to make that transition from fossil fuels into a hydrogen economy. There's some great roadmaps out there already. And I think with a little bit more effort and funding, we can see those accelerate. And I don't think there's any reason why we can't see that from 2025 onwards even, we can see the scaling of markets that allow for transportation, industrial use, even into consumer use, and that by 2035, we have a core hydrogen energy market in place.
Thank you so much. So three panelists believe that the hydrogen is gonna reshaping somehow the energy markets, but all of you indicated some of the challenges on the way of the hydrogen. So let me ask this question from Emmanuel. How do you think this hydrogen is reshaping energy market, and how do you see the trajectory of this reshaping?
It definitely does, and thank you for this question. I think from our point of view, from the MHI point of view, being technology company, we put decarbonization very high in our agenda. In fact, in all communications in the last years, decarbonization and consequently energy transition is the pillar of the development of our technology offering. And inevitably, if we are speaking on decarbonization, hydrogen is the key enabler to achieve decarbonization, has been mentioned already in the hard-to-abate sectors, and also in what we call the last mileage of decarbonization. That means the really deep decarbonization to achieve 80 or 100% carbon-free energy economy. Having said that, however, I need to repeat that hydrogen is not completely new, neither in the industry. You mentioned this 80 million tons per year that is currently consumed, nor for the energy industry. So the question for us is, why now? What changed? And we have this hype all over the globe on hydrogen. And what has changed is the combination of two factors. I mentioned decarbonization as being the first and the predominant one. And the second is more power sector specific, and it comes with a massive rollout and the competitiveness of renewable electricity production. And that goes hand in hand with the need of storage. So in contrary to the earlier efforts to introduce and to roll out hydrogen technologies, we have this time this combination of these two basic needs, decarb and energy storage. And for us, hydrogen, carbon-free hydrogen, is the key enabler for both. And that's the difference to the past. On the other hand, technology-wise, as I told you, hydrogen has been in the market. So we don't, of course, we need to roll out and make more competitive technologies, but especially in the green hydrogen electrolyzers, is known for hundreds of years. So it's about scaling up. It's about making that competitive, and it's about rolling out at scale at different sectors. And this has regional and sectoral differences. And that's very interesting to see how this is globally evolving around the different regions of the world. We will face, even I'm based in Europe, even in Europe, we have different policies and different priorities in the hydrogen economy in different countries, favoring the one or the other technology, the one or the other carbon-free profile of hydrogen. And the same is happening in other regions of the world. So it will have regional differences. We will see more and more the commoditization of hydrogen. Thus, we will have more and more energy exporting regions to match the energy consuming regions, and we will have sectors that will be differently affected. The steel sector is a good example. Fiona mentioned that already. Other hard to abate sectors, the petrochemical sectors, and the power sector, of course, and the transport will be massively affected by the hydrogen introduction. And at the end of the day, what we need are the right technology for the right sector at the right point of time. And this is, as you correctly pointed out, where we are right now. The race has just started.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Can you just let me to ask this question? You mentioned about these two issues for the hydrogen decarbonization and about the power. But I just want to ask you that the matter of the decarbonization was, for example, raised years before, like, for example, 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago after the Paris Agreement. But the hydrogen gained a lot of interest only in 3 years or a little more. So is it going to be the second part that you mentioned, that maybe some technologies like renewables, like batteries, like other technologies couldn't follow the needs of the energy, like, for example, in the heavy good transportation or for the marine sector. So the technology of developing those batteries for these applications actually couldn't follow the needs. And so that's why a lot of interest came to the molecule energy carriers, and the best one is now hydrogen. Do you agree with this statement or not?
Yes, I think in general terms, it's correct. And everybody was aware on the need of massive deployment of energy storage technologies. The fact is, however, that if we move storage into scale, both in times and capacity, and we go from intraday electricity storage, which is the typical application of batteries, to seasonal storage in order to shift more and more bigger chunks of energy from one day to another, or even to shift green energy from one location of the globe to another, then batteries and storing electricity as such, even at grid sites, could not do the job. So it is because of the need of energy storage that hydrogen make the rebound. I can remind everybody that we had an initiative early 2000, mainly from the US, and it was a global initiative, the International Partnership of Hydrogen Economy. Australia was also part of that, and Fiona could recognize that. But however, at that time, early 2000, we didn't have the chance to deliver the breakthrough because of cost reasons, and because the need for energy storage was not so profound. Nowadays, the business cases are improving. We have curtailment of renewable electricity already in place, which justifies large-scale energy storage. So it's the energy storage, hydrogen as a storage, and the value of hydrogen and is as a mean, and in comparison to other means of energy storage, rather than an energy carrier only. That's the difference, to my opinion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me raise our main theme of our discussion about the rainbow of the hydrogen, about these colors like blue, green, and turquoise that I summarized them for the audience. So, now some countries, I can say that actually now most of the countries are following and are actually advocating some green hydrogen, like for example in Europe, in EU. But still we see that, like for example, a couple of weeks ago, when a UK hydrogen strategy published, that in the UK is mentioned the twin tracks and view on the blue hydrogen is inside the UK hydrogen strategy, while in EU hydrogen strategy is clearly mentioned that the main priority for the EU is green hydrogen, and other clean pathways, not even the blue, other clean pathways are considered. In some other countries, like Russia, they look for the blue hydrogen, or most of the gas exporting, maybe except Australia, because Australia has the benefits of employing both pathways. But in some other gas exporting countries, so mostly they look for the blue hydrogen, and they say that the blue hydrogen can have the very great potential to introduce to the world, especially in medium term. So I just want to ask Graham, maybe you can respond to this question that how do you see the role of blue and green hydrogen from a global perspective? This question is very important and is the theme of this panel discussion. So I invite all other panelists to add their opinion on that, but I'll start with you, Graham.
I guess, you know, this is one of the great debates, isn't it? You know, the different type of hydrogen, whether it be blue, whether it be green, whether it be grey. And I think, look, I think it goes back to the earlier point about the status of hydrogen. You know, if we want to use it as a fuel source going forward, we've got to find an economical and scalable way to bring it to market. It's got to be affordable. It's got to be done in a manner in which you can transition and also ensure projects are executable, risks are managed, and then hydrogen can be created in a way that it can be transported and then consumed by the end user. So, you know, to that point, you know, if I look specifically at blue and green hydrogen, clearly we've got to continue to assess the overall cost curve of green hydrogen, the infrastructure that's got to be put in place, the large scale projects that would need to be deployed. That's going to take time. It's going to take funding. I think with blue hydrogen, depending on where you are in the world, there's already infrastructure that's in place at scale. Now, clearly, blue hydrogen comes with the added challenge of making sure that you don't continue to create emissions. So, you know, you got to partner that with CCUS, so carbon capture technologies. But a lot of the infrastructure for blue hydrogen can be deemed to already exist. It's already at scale. It's already in place. And it's how do we make it friendly to use in terms of the energy transition at a cost-effective level till we can scale green hydrogen to such a size that then it can be deployed globally and it can be, again, a price that people can consume it at. So I think the two have to coexist together. Similar technologies will be used in some areas for both. For example, when you speak about compression, you'll use that for blue hydrogen as you would for green hydrogen. So I think it's a case of accepting blue hydrogen has a role to play, adopting a methodology that allows you to reduce the emissions of blue hydrogen whilst continuing to keep it cost effective, and at the same time developing that roadmap and the scalability and the repeatability of green hydrogen.
Thank you so much. So one point that I want to raise here in the blue hydrogen is that even, especially after the announcement of the UK hydrogen strategy, I have read a lot of analysis about the blue hydrogen, that if it is a real blue, and I read one article that actually claimed that the carbon impact of the blue hydrogen even is more than the natural gas itself. So, and in terms of the technology also, we see that, for example, if we just look at the technology in the methane reforming, the steam methane reforming, so the carbon that is captured, and we call it a pre-combustion carbon capturing, because that fuel is not going to the combustion, and the carbon is methane, but still heat is needed for the process of the steam methane reforming. And the heat is going to be again provided by maybe fossil fuels. So if we want to capture all carbon, we need to apply even if both pre-combustion and post-combustion carbon capturing. And in this case, in most of the time, we don't look into the post-combustion for those fuels that is being combusted to provide the heat, and it is around maybe 20% of the total carbon. So in this case, maybe we need to look deeply into how we can make that blue hydrogen, the impact of the carbon from the blue hydrogen less, maybe combination of technologies, like for example, that heat can be provided by the renewables, so renewables can help with the blue hydrogen or not. So this type of the discussions is something that I want to raise, but let me ask Mathieu about this question about the blue and the green hydrogen. And then I just want to add this question, that do you believe the hydrogen will become the bulk energy carrier of the future energy?
Yeah, the question is very good and interesting, and I think I will be very pragmatic. I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to comment about the technical stuff about whether blue hydrogen is emitting more carbon emission than gray hydrogen or natural gas.
That is not my question, right?
I have the feeling that we need to be so pragmatic and not dogmatic. So when I read some articles, I have the feeling that some experts may have some interest into such or such technologies. I believe there is a room for blue and green and turquoise hydrogen, and that is good because it can help, and it will help to decrease the cost of hydrogen components. It can help to accompany the growth of demand of hydrogen. And maybe in some context, blue hydrogen will have added value. In others, it won't. As an example, we see that with COVID context, many grids have overcapacity. And with their coal and gas power plants, maybe in such context, the blue hydrogen could be a great solution, as long as it is helping to replace gray hydrogen. But indeed, on the very long run, green hydrogen will be the preferred options. But on the short run, I think we need to be pragmatic, and we need solutions which will help hydrogen to be more competitive. That is the most important to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
May I add a comment? Because Mathieu was correct. It's in fact an engineering question, and now here the engineer and the professor speaks through me. So let me say the following. We at Mitsubishi, we have both technologies, and in fact we have also recently invested into Turkey's startups, or which is of course not as such developed as blue and green. And we have done that because we believe that hydrogen is a nice thing for the energy transition as long as it is carbon free. So for us and for everybody in this debate, the question is how we measure exactly the carbon footprint of its type of hydrogen that is going to substitute gray hydrogen at first. Because the first movers will be really to substitute hydrogen consumption from gray to green. This is the low-hanging fruit. Now, we have done some work together with the European Commission when drafting the regulation on the renewable fuels. And there is an established methodology similar to the life cycle analysis to deliver the carbon footprint for it. And you correctly pointed out, if you introduce into the boundary also the heat consumption, most probably technologically, you could need to decarbonize both effluents, combustion products, and upstream in the reformer, which can be technologically done, and that's the policy that we are going to apply. Hybridization is another policy. And the question at the end is, why are we doing that? We are doing that because green hydrogen, that means abundant renewable electricity, is not common in all places, and it's not similarly competitive in all places. So what we need in the hydrogen economy is scale, because we don't have the hydrogen infrastructure in the energy system. We have a limited infrastructure where hydrogen is consumed, but we don't have a massive hydrogen infrastructure. And to justify the infrastructure, we need to introduce hydrogen at scale. And in many markets, the UK example is a good example. In the US, we can have both, Australia also. We need to have hydrogen from natural gas, which is for some markets more competitive, and it will deliver the mass into hydrogen to justify investments for the end use, new hydrogen pipelines, new storage sites for hydrogen, and all this stuff. So I think blue hydrogen or hydrogen from natural gas would be, due to the scale and the cost competitiveness, a kind of precursor. Mathieu was pretty right on that. And it will pave the way for green hydrogen. So we're seeing not an either or, but it's a complementarity question. And that's why we have the technologies, and technologies are maturing in both ways. So that's our view on hydrogen. Because I've seen also the publication, and some of them are from academical colleagues, I need to iterate that we have to have a solid methodology to measure the carbon footprint. Otherwise, we are subjective, and we lose credibility if we put subjective views as a result of a scientific analysis.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the points that you added. Fiona, well, I want to ask about the role of the Asia, role of the Australia. You mentioned that the Australia, with these great projects and so the policies, will gain a leading role among globally and even in the region. So if I just want to add some points that, some facts that, for example, we are talking about the region that the three pioneers of the hydrogen evolved from this region, like the Japan, that's the first country which published the hydrogen strategies back in 2017. Even the second country was South Korea, and the third country was Australia, both in 2019. And then after that, in 2020, some European countries and some other countries in South America started to publish these strategies. And in terms of the potential, we see that, for example, the largest LNG importer, Japan, is located in this region. Even the largest LNG exporter, Australia, if we can say that it's equal to Qatar, but still one of the largest LNG exporter is still in the region, Australia. So we see that the potential of the export and import in this region is very high. And again, in terms of the potential of the production and the technology, we see, for example, in Australia, there is the potential to go for both blue and green and even turquoise hydrogen. And we see a lot of projects in the blue, like in the first complete supply chain of the hydrogen, that is the even name is the hydrogen supply chain between Australia and the Japan, that is in blue hydrogen, the gasification of the coal in the Latrobe Valley, Victoria. So I would like to ask you, do you see a leading role for the region in the global perspective? So is Asia Pacific or ASEAN countries a region that can lead the hydrogen industry in terms of the technology, in terms of the trade? Do you see the first trade? Actually, the first trade happened like from Saudi Arabia to the Japan in form of the ammonia. But I mean, for a regular, for contracted trade, will be something within the region, within the Asia Pacific. But how do you see the role of the region, the Asia, in hydrogen, in the future of the hydrogen?
I think that it's too hard to say, but it'll also be about the lens that one chooses to use. So we know that Japan and South Korea are keen to look at fuel cells. So there's a sort of fuel cell focus there with vehicles, for example. In contrast, we know that Germany wants to really lead the way on electrolyzers. We're going to need all of these things. And so I think that the jury's also out as to whether we in Australia would export only to our region. The initial enthusiasm for there to be a hydrogen strategy in Australia was based upon that strong interest from people from countries in our region, and particularly Japan and South Korea, and then it increased to Singapore as well, to look at importing hydrogen from Australia. That's really what drove a lot of that interest. And I think we are very well positioned to be a leading producer. If we could also sort of develop and export technology, I know that would be something that we would be very keen to do. But there will be technological improvements that will come from elsewhere. So it'll be in the countries that already have automotive industries. We lost ours. So the different improvements will come from different places. And I would say that despite it being about our region in the early days being a handful of years ago, we're talking to Germany at the moment. There's conversations going on with ports in Europe and ports in Australia about hydrogen and its derivatives being sent to Europe. Now, half the people I speak to about this sort of guffaw and say, well, that's silly. The distance is too great. Why would they purchase from so far outside their region? And others, I'm finding people who are saying, well, actually, depending on what you're sending across the ocean, it doesn't matter all that much, those extra days at sea. And that's whether you're looking at liquid hydrogen, obviously, or ammonia, or methanol. And so we're all still trying to work this out. And there is something to be said for countries diversifying, if they're going to be importers of hydrogen, diversifying those sources so that no one is, if the geopolitical issues don't raise their heads as much as they have in a fossil fuel dependent world. So I'd say the region is vital, and Australia can be a leader in our region. I think Australia, if we can achieve getting to scale, and I have to say, scale is I think beyond most people's comprehension, because we haven't really mapped out just how many billions of dollars we would need, how much land we would need to get to, say, net zero in Australia. So to decarbonise our existing energy use, to then also have hydrogen for say a steel industry and an export industry of ammonia and hydrogen. To do all of this means an enormous amount of construction activity and billions and billions of dollars. So if we do this, then I think Australia, it's also incumbent on us to help more developing nations in our region and to, yes, break down some of the sort of the idea of there being a green premium. But it may well be that it's our relationships with people around the globe and that the distance is not that big a deal. And we are increasingly seeing that argument, and it's particularly with Germany-Australia relationship. We may actually find that that sort of influence in places other than Europe. So the German influence in our region may be enough to bring the price down in our region and then affect the price back in Europe. This may be something that works entirely differently to how our oil and gas markets have worked in the past.
Do do you think Australia can emerge as the largest hydrogen exporter in the future, just what it did about the LNG? I can also mention that in our modeling, our modeling scenarios that I developed on hydrogen, Australia emerged in our forecast as the largest. But I want your opinion on that.
My opinion?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Do you think?
Look, I genuinely don't know. I haven't done the modelling, and I have found so far that the answers aren't there. Everything comes down so much to one's assumptions. Not that I'm questioning your modelling, and obviously it suits us to say Australia will be the leader globally. But I think it is our race to lose, but we could still lose it if we don't get planning and spending and if we don't put the policy in that actually creates a market, because markets don't create themselves at a great loss. So that's something which we need to do still in Australia. We need something like a net zero target. We need something like a carbon price. It doesn't have to be those exact things, but ways of measuring and valuing what hydrogen brings to the party is the way that we get this industry up, and we don't have that just yet.
Yeah, and that is what Australia and some other countries are doing, developing a complete supply chain of the hydrogen in the production and demand side. Thank you so much. Emmanuel, I just want to move into the subject of a roadmap for ASEAN, about the ASEAN. So just recently, Japan announced this Asia Energy Transition Initiative to assist ASEAN and countries to becoming decarbonized societies. But how about the hydrogen roadmap? How do you see a necessity or advantages for developing a hydrogen strategy for ASEAN countries? And what is the challenges and possible solutions to build a roadmap for the ASEAN?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's particularly good because, you know, we have seen, as you mentioned, countries like Japan and South Korea and Australia playing a pivotal role. For instance, when I was doing together with the IEA, the hydrogen roadmap, which has been presented in June 2019 in Japan, both Japanese companies, Korean companies, and the chief scientists of Australia were the main contributors. And of course, Europe, because of their ambitious decarbonization goals, they catch up and they embrace that, and they make the announcements of 6 gigawatt electrolyzers and so on. Now, for the ASEAN countries, we have the advantage in the region that we have both consumers and potential producers. May I remind you that some of the ASEAN countries are big hydrocarbons exporters to the global market. So they have the culture, and they can gradually transform this with exporting zero carbon fuels, as I like to call it, because I'm sure that you will agree with me that it's not necessarily liquefied hydrogen will come out as a commodity. It can be, for instance, ammonia, it can be synthetic fuels on zero carbon footprint and so on. And for that, what we need is scale. We need scale and solid business cases. And once again, I would like to mention that this regional character of hydrogen, that means we will have regions, and obviously Australia is one of them. There are other regions in the ASEAN countries that have the advantage of producing either green or carbon-free or blue hydrogen at scale, much more than the country's own demand could justify. So they will be net exporters. And these net exporters and other ASEAN countries are not so developed as the Western world or whatsoever. So these net exporters will have this opportunity to boost their own economies by becoming net exporters. On the other hand, we have in the ASEAN market pretty much developed economies. If I'm thinking, for instance, on the carbon-free powering of data centers, and as an example, in the most advanced countries of the region, these are examples where hydrogen will play a pivotal role. And last but not least, scale and competitive matters. And let me remind you that in that region, we have the predominant role of natural gas, and as a first enabler for decarbonization, we have witnessed the introduction of natural gas as a substitute to coal for the energy infrastructure of some of the countries in the region. And the next step will be practically decarbonizing natural gas. And that brings us to, for instance, to the co-utilization of hydrogen with natural gas in power production equipment like the gas turbine. So it's not only fuel cells, of course, fuel cells are promising, but small scale application for hydrogen use. We have the gas turbine infrastructure that could absorb large quantities of hydrogen, thus determining locally the decarbonization of the countries. So we have this whole portfolio of solutions that could practically establish leadership of the region in the hydrogen economy.
Thank you so much. So we have a very limited time and a lot of questions. So still, I couldn't touch on matters like regulatory about the type of the hydrogen trade, that whether it is ammonia, liquefied hydrogen, or any other liquid organic hydrogen carriers, pipeline or others. But fortunately, some of the panelists addressed some point of that. But as a final question, I would like to ask Graham about this recent collaboration of the Baker Hughes with Bloom Energy Air Product to develop and drive hydrogen solutions. Could you elaborate more on the strategies Baker Hughes adopted in terms of the hydrogen? But I really appreciate if you do it very briefly because of the limitation of the time.
Yeah, well, we will be quick. So look, I think if anything, one thing we've learned from the last 20 to 30 years in industry in general and the energy sector is that we go through boom and busts, which make things unaffordable at times and unsustainable. And I think what we see in this renewed energy forward plan, we have to coexist as partners. We have to collaborate, whether it be with governments, whether it be with associations, whether it be with other technology companies. So I think what you're seeing Baker Hughes do is create those partnership roadmaps. And specifically when you look at Bloom Energy, as was quite rightly said earlier, fuel cells will play a role, but so will turbines. The combination of both will be pretty potent when we go forward and we bring those two technologies together. And that's what we are looking to do with Bloom Energy, is to integrate both the process of fuel cells and turbines. And then for air products, it's really looking at the process and the utilization in the gas arena. And so looking at the different applications of technologies, whether it be turbines or compression, to then bring large scale projects together at the lowest possible risk with some on-time delivery at the heart of that to reduce the risk and to ensure the costs don't blow out. So that's really what we're trying to do with Bloom Energy and with air products. But the theme of it all is to partner together, to collaborate together, to create something that's sustainable.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for your very bright and brilliant points that you raised. So we can conclude that the hydrogen will reshape somehow the future of the energy and will emerge as a player in among the other energy carriers. But to what extent it can evolve, for example, to 2050, it depends on the strategies, the policies, some other issues, technologies, and the cost. And even if in the blue, green, or other types of the technology to produce hydrogen, all other things are included, like policy support, like the technology advancement, like the reduction of the cost and getting competitive to come into the market and gain share. So we also, you actually also mentioned the hybrid technology employment, like for renewables and fossil fuels, and other measures that have been done. And we have seen the role of the Asia Pacific in advocating and in developing the hydrogen in the future. So again, I appreciate your time that you dedicated to be in this panel. It was a really pleasure for me to be with you and moderate this session. And also I appreciate the audience to take the time and listen to our discussion. Thank you so much.